Hi there, I'm Andrew Schultz, Community Manager here at RentPrep. I'm also a licensed real estate broker in the state of New York with over 14 years of experience in the property management and rental property industries. On today's episode, we're going to be talking all about rental application fees. What are they, when should you charge them, and how much should they be? We've got a lot to look at today, so let's go ahead and jump right in. So first things first, what is a rental application fee? And should you be charging one? Well, a rental application fee is a really straightforward concept. Essentially, it's the fee that you charge someone when they apply to live in your apartment, whether it be an apartment, a home, whatever the unit is. The rental application fee is the fee that you charge to run their rental application and see if you want to rent to that person. If you're not already charging an application fee, you absolutely should be. Before we talk about what the fees actually cover, you need to understand that simply by having an application fee, it's going to help you to eliminate people who aren't truly interested in the apartment and are actually just there applying to see if they're going to get the place or not. They may not be that interested. They could be tire kickers, whatever the case may be. Time goes into every single rental application that you have to do a verification on, whether or not that person is approved or not. So you need to make sure that you're charging some sort of an application fee, if for no other reason than to help you eliminate some of the tire kickers and people that otherwise just simply would not apply for an apartment with you. Now, what does an application fee actually cover? The application fee covers the credit and the background check, as well as the time that you're going to need to spend running down the application and verifying all the information on it. I know that we spent a ton of time discussing credit and background checks in other videos, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on that here, but running a credit and a background check on every single applicant that's going to be living in your unit is critical for you to understand who it is that you're going to be renting to and whether or not that person is going to be someone that ultimately you want to have living in one of your units. Spending some time reading through the credit and background check can tell you a lot about the people that you're choosing to rent to. For instance, when we look at a credit score or a payment history, we're able to determine whether someone is generally paying their bills on time or whether or not they're missing payments all over the place. We can also see how well they're managing their debt obligations by looking at their balances and their credit limits. If they are at or over the limit on a lot of their credit cards, they may be one bad day away from being unable to meet their obligations, not only to the credit card companies, but also to you as the landlord. So it's definitely worth spending the time and the money on having credit and background checks run on every single applicant that's going to be living in your unit. So what should you charge for a credit and background check fee? I recommend making sure that you are covering your costs for the credit and the background check, as well as some additional funds to cover the time that you're spending on each application. It's more than just running a credit and background check. You do have to go through and do your income verification. You have to go through and talk to other landlords. If that's something that you still do, you have to go through and maybe speak to other references, whatever the case may be. Even the time spent reviewing the credit and background checks counts. It's all time, and you should be compensated for that in some fashion. I've seen some landlords that have no application fee, which, as we've already discussed, is a bad idea. I typically see landlords charging somewhere in the $20 to $50 range. And that seems to be pretty much par for the course, pretty much anywhere in the country as near as I've been able to find. And I can tell you that in some areas it will be more, and in some areas it will be less. But going back to landlords that have no application fee, on the flip side of that is application fees that are just outrageously high, because a landlord feels that by having that high application fee, they're taking that potential tenant off the market, if you will, until such time that the landlord has reviewed their application and made a decision. I don't know as though I agree with that tactic, but I think the logic is probably pretty sound there. If you're putting $200 or $250 down on an application fee, chances are you're waiting to hear back on that apartment before you go out and apply for an apartment somewhere else. So I think that there is some merit to the tactic. It's not a tactic that I would like to use, but I think that there is some logic there for landlords that do choose to go that route. Now, it's also worth noting that in many states and municipalities, there are actually pieces of legislation in place that will limit what you can charge for your background check fees, for your credit and background check fees, your application fees, whatever you're calling it. And they also will limit, in some instances, the information you're able to access, and also in some instances, in what order you need to approve applicants. So I'm not going to dive too deeply into every state's laws here, but just understand that you need to spend a little bit of time double checking the rules and laws in your state and in your area to ensure that you're remaining compliant. That said, we will talk about New York for a little bit, simply because I'm most familiar with the laws here. In New York State, we cannot charge a rental application fee. We can charge a credit and background check fee. So you have to understand that something as simple as calling your fee by the wrong name can create a headache for you down the road, as silly as that sounds. The difference between a rental application fee and a credit and background check fee sounds very, very negligible, but one of those is permitted in New York State and one of those is not permitted in New York State. So you have to understand what the rules are in your area. On top of that, we do have some additional restrictions here in the state of New York. Our combined limit for credit and background checks is $20 combined. So we cannot charge more than $20 combined for the credit check and the background check. And no, that's not individual, it is combined. So every time I run a credit and background check here at Own Buffalo, we actually lose money because our cost is higher than the $20 that the New York State legislator has said that we're allowed to charge. It's a little bit obnoxious, but it's something that we deal with because we understand that having those credit and background checks is worth spending a little bit of money out of pocket that's not covered by the application fee that's paid for by the tenant. So in addition to the $20 cap, if you have a fee that's actually lower than that, for instance, if your credit and background checks only cost you $15 for whatever reason, then that is the maximum that you can charge in this state. If your cost is $15, New York State says that your cap is $15. And if your cost is $35, then New York State says that your cap is $20. So if it's under $20, you have to use the true amount. That's all you can charge the applicant. But if it's over $20, it maxes out at that $20. It's a little obnoxious, but like I said, it's something that we deal with just to ensure that we're getting the information that we truly need in order to make an educated decision on our applicants. In addition to the $20 cap, we cannot charge a credit and background check fee if the applicant is able to provide us with a copy of their credit and background check that's dated within 30 days. I'm pretty sure you can still run a fresh credit and background check if you don't want to use their data, if you think the data may be compromised. The only difference is you can't charge them for it. So at that point, you are actually eating the entire cost out of pocket, and the applicant is eating none of that cost. Furthermore, if the applicant requests it, we have to provide a receipt that shows the actual cost of the report, as well as provide them an actual copy of the report. I don't think that that particular clause has been argued in New York State yet, but requiring us to provide a copy of the report directly to the person who's applying for the apartment actually puts us in direct violation of the agreements we have with our reporting agencies, the credit reporting agencies, who specifically state that we cannot share information directly with the applicant and that we have to point the applicant back to the reporting agency for their free copy of their credit report, or if there's something that they're looking to dispute or whatever. All of that gets handled through the reporting agency and not through us. So for us to be told that we have to provide a copy of the report actually puts us in violation of the contracts that we signed with our data providers. New York State really did not have the proper stakeholders in place at this table when they were developing this legislation, that's for sure. I want to talk briefly about fees versus deposits. Earlier, I had mentioned that calling a fee by the wrong name can turn into a big headache for you down the road, and I see a lot of people use the words refundable fee and non-refundable deposit, and both of those terms are incorrect. Deposits are refundable. By their very nature, that's how deposits work. If I hand you a security deposit when I go to move into your unit, I expect that I'm going to get that deposit back minus any damages when I move out. It's not just going right into your pocket as a landlord. As a matter of fact, it's considered a liability on your corporate books when you're talking about security deposits. That's not your money. You're holding it on behalf of someone else. That's what a deposit is, something that would be refundable at the end of the lease term or refundable at any time, I suppose, depending on what the deposit is for. But that's the concept behind a deposit. It's refundable. Fees, on the other hand, are only refundable if you make them refundable. I strongly recommend that you make your application fees a non-refundable fee. Every applicant takes time to process, like we had just discussed. So even if you haven't run a credit and a background check on that application, but you've reached a point where you're ready to decline the application, maybe their income is insufficient or whatever the case may be, you should still be compensated for the time that you've spent working on that application. That's why your application fee should be non-refundable, in my opinion. These would generally be considered income to the landlord. And again, you need to check your state and local laws to see if this is something that you're allowed to charge in your area or if there are any restrictions on you. But this is one of those areas that you really need to understand and have the naming right before you put this stuff into place so that you don't wind up in hot water down the road. Now, some landlords will choose to have an application fee that actually converts to become part of the security deposit once an application is approved, or once the lease is signed, or once the remaining balance is paid, or whatever the trigger point is that the landlord chooses essentially. This fee would generally be non-refundable, so those who are not approved for the apartments are not going to be eligible for a refund on their fee, but the approved applicant's fee becomes part of their security deposit. There's a conversion point there where that fee becomes a refundable deposit. You're making that conversion. You've made that decision as the landlord, essentially. That would be the point at which you would convert the fee over to their security deposit or a portion of their security deposit, whatever the case may be, and that would become refundable at the end of their tenancy. Collecting a security deposit up front instead of an application fee would mean that the deposit is refundable if that applicant is not approved. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. This is going to lead to more paperwork and more accounting for you. I would recommend skipping this option and just getting the security deposit after the approval, and I would charge a fee on the front end. So there you have it. Accepting a rental application fee doesn't have to be complicated and it doesn't have to be confusing, but you do need to understand what the rules are in your area and how to operate within them. How are you going about collecting your application fees? Are there any crazy rules in your area that you need to be compliant with? Do us a favor and drop us a comment down below letting us know what you thought of this video. And if you have any ideas for future content, let us know down in the comments as well. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm Andrew Schultz with rentprep.com, and I'll see you soon.